glad to be here. And some of the participants of the conference, they already mentioned hyper-casual. And in my speech, I would like to focus a little bit more on it to see what's the market here, what kind of games we can make, and what tips we should keep in mind if we want to build a successful hyper-casual game. So let me share my screen. Let me know when you see it. Is it okay?
Yes, we can see it. Do you want to go full screen?
Sure. Yeah. Just a second.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So as we mentioned, the hyper-casual games are the simple ones actually. But it's harder than you think. It's not that easy. So let's dig deeper into it and see what it is about. So, well, since the beginning of a hyper-casual, a lot of experts were saying that it's not going to last long. So, for example, on the bottom of the screen, you can see the quote from Iron Source co-founder, who was saying that the economic model behind hyper-casual is not sustainable enough. And it was just 1 year prior to creating their own publishing agency, Supersonic, which works pretty well right now. So let's look at the numbers. So hyper-casual nowadays makes up 30% of all mobile game downloads, and it's growing. Also, we reached 12 billion downloads in 2020, and the app revenues are also on the rise, ad revenues. So actually, if you can see, the market is growing. We also keep an eye on probably consolidated data from 2021. We still are waiting for the final results, but we can already surely say that the growth is slowing down. But however, hyper-casual is continuing to grow. Of course, it's not all ideal as we can think about it. For example, we have our own challenges, the end of app tracking, full app tracking transparency on iOS. Also, the changes on Android are upcoming, and also the competition is getting really tough. And at the same time, we have CPIs which are rising, but still we can say that hyper-casual is something to stay. It's something which has been around for 6 years, and it changed mobile gaming industry forever. So let's take a look what's the most important for players. What kind of product do they want? And if we zoom on those games, we can see that the players are searching for simple, really digestible experiences, but which are interesting enough to keep them engaged for a while. So, and when you found this sweet spot between being simple and being entertaining, and your game is working, it's actually too early to relax, because hyper-casual games are very short-lived. So you want to reinvent this recipe again and again and issue new games and push them to the market in order to engage your audience. And also you might notice that a lot of hyper-casual games, they remind us of something, right? Probably of Flappy Bird or a Doodle Jump, right? They are actually proto hyper-casual games, but modern hyper-casual is very much different from those, let's say, previous generation of games. And let's see in which sense. First of all the hyper-casual games are system one. What does it mean? It means that you can play it while doing something else. They don't require you to be fully focused on the game. On the contrary, for example, to reading or doing some calculations. So, and that means that your game should be really super easy and free of a frustration. So it should be really hard to lose in your game. And of course, the best option is to make the entry barrier in terms of skills as low as possible, so any child, any elderly person can enjoy it. And of course, it should have one finger controls. Of course, it's because it's the type of control which is the most understandable, it's the easiest to get, and also coupled with a portrait mode, you can enjoy those games on the go. And nowadays, on the contrary to, for example, Flappy Bird, hyper-casual games are divided into levels. And there are, again, several reasons for that. First of all, the player, when he comes into the game, he would like to have this quick experience, play a couple of levels, and then close your application without losing too much progress. And also it's more convenient from monetization point of view, because we monetize our games for advertising and we show it between the levels. So you want to make sure that you're not interrupting the gaming experience when you show an advertising. And as a game maker, to start in this industry, what do you need to understand? Of course, first, you need to understand the economic model behind hyper-casual. So it starts from a discovery of your game on social media. Most of your players will see an advertising on TikTok, on Facebook, and they'll download your app. And since they're inside, our goal is to show them as many advertisements as possible. So those are banners, interstitials, and rewarded videos. And of course, the longer they stay, the more advertisement we can show them and the more money we can earn. And of course, as I mentioned, hyper-casual games are very short-lived. So already by day one, half of your audience will be gone. And by day 7, there'll be hardly anyone who will play your game. So given that a short lifespan of a user within your game, we need to scale it. We need volumes. We need a lot of those tiny journeys which bring money, which monetize the game. So what does it mean for us in terms of metrics we need to achieve for our game? Of course, the key KPI here is CPI. So it should be as low as possible. If your CPI is low, that means your game is marketable. It's appealing to a really wide audience. And in hyper-casual, it should be around 30 cents. And as soon as we are buying our users cheaply, we need to retain them as much as possible in our game and to maximize their LTV. LTV consists of several components. One of them is playtime. We need to retain daily a player for longer. Ideally, it should be more than 10 minutes. So we need to be sure to create a really smooth, nice journey and sticky gameplay. Retention is also very important. We want to retain a bigger portion of our players daily. So the target KPI here for day 1 is 45% and above. And for day 7, the good metrics is 10%. And of course, the key metrics here is the quantity of rewarded videos per daily active user. So if your users are playing long enough, if there's enough of them staying, you want to make sure that during this journey, they watch at least 2 rewarded videos. Rewarded videos are very important. They are the most profitable type of advertisement in hyper-casual games. And we should aim to maximize this KPI. And of course, your game will be profitable as soon as the LTV is bigger than the CPI. That means that your game will earn money and you can scale it. So pretty simple. And if we are interested, we can take a look at what kind of games you actually can make and monetize this way. So the market has several subgenres. One of the most popular ones is runners. It's where we go from point A to point B. Then we have IO games. It's where we compete on the closed arena with our fake opponents. Then we have aim games, where we shoot or just throw objects at the target. Then light puzzles, they can be very different. Deterministic puzzles, where there's only one right position or answer. Physics-based, where we play with properties of objects, or choice-based, like, for example, trivias, where you need to find or type a right answer. There are idle games, which are around management of businesses or resources. They can be passive or active. And also the simulation games, which are basically real life activities, which were hyper-casualized. And let's dig a little bit deeper into each of those subgenres, starting with runners. It's the most popular subgenre of hyper-casual games in 2021. And actually, it was reinventing itself through the whole history of hyper-casual. Something like 4 years ago, most of runners were in 2D. They were endless, they were not divided into levels. They were very geometric. They had the abstract settings. Meanwhile, nowadays it's drastically different. The recipe for a successful runner in 2021 is to be in 3D, to use some marketable theme which attracts attention, which is easy to associate with. And also adding secondary mechanic can be very useful, because you not just run from point A to point B, but also you doing something on the way. You probably cut something or collect or merge in order to spice up the challenge. Next, we have IO games. They were very popular in 2018 when they just emerged, and they took the top charts by storm. But the same formula again and again, reskinned in various formulations, was getting a bit repetitive. So the CPI rose because the players were a bit getting bored of fighting on the same arena, getting bigger, collecting resources. However, in 2021, we saw a lot of interesting comebacks from this subgenre, because it benefited a lot from Fall Guys trend, for example, borrowed some elements from Battle Royale, or adapted the gameplay to the rules of Among Us, for example. So this is a subgenre which used to be popular, but nowadays sometimes it comes back, especially coupled with interesting trends. Light puzzles are probably the oldest subgenre of hypercasual, because it started with our game 2048, actually, made by Ketchapp in 2016. So, light puzzles are a tricky thing nowadays, because you need, again, to try to find this balance between offering a challenge which is interesting, which pushes the player to progress through the game, but at the same time it should be free of frustration, it should be easy, and progression and retention are often the challenges for puzzle games, because as soon as the player loses, as soon as he doesn't get the level, he churns. So in hyper casual, losing is super bad. You're going to lose your audience. And basically, a lot of developers take a different path nowadays. They start to make a focus on just pleasant experience. You just do something pleasant, you repeat some actions or rearrange stuff like sorting, where the interest basically comes in this mesmerizing ASMR experience rather than a real puzzle challenge. Aim game is another subgenre of hypercasual. So it's probably by far the most demanding one, because you are required to shoot at the target, and sometimes at the right time, which is actually quite a big challenge for a hyper-casual audience. So you also, the developers are taking often the shooter approach, which attracts more masculine audience. Meanwhile, the majority of hyper-casual players are female. There are approximately 62% of hyper-casual players which are female, and therefore they have niche audience. So that means the CPI is slightly higher, but at the same time, those games often manage to leverage this niche audience by keeping it longer in the game, and by taking the deep hyper-casual approach, which goes really well with aim games. When you have a shooter, it's really nice to have interesting meta where you upgrade your skill, where you upgrade your weapons and your equipment. So yeah, those games are also having their own audience, and we see them frequently in top charts. Next comes simulation games. So this subgenre didn't exist before 2019, and it stayed very popular all through the 2020. It was extremely interesting to see the emergence of some new subgenres. And basically through 2020, we saw all the possible real world activities being hyper-casualized. And those games are relying a lot on those mesmerizing ASMR experiences. So the graphics, polished visuals are extremely important in those type of games. And due to the fact that they're so eye-catchy, they tend to have lower CPIs. However, it's extremely difficult to retain players in such games. So in-game KPIs sometimes are on the weaker side, because this contemplative experience, which is actually bordering with interactive video even sometimes, is getting repetitive pretty quickly. So often the developers also apply a lot of meta in order to retain players for longer. And here we have, last but not least, the youngest and probably the most challenging subgenre of hypercasual. It appeared in 2021, and it's action idle. So we can say that this subgenre is as niche as passive idle. And we can say that only 1% of all most downloadable games on both platforms fall in this category. So it's very niche. And however, the life cycle of action idle is bigger than a usual hyper-casual game, because we have this core gameplay which is very addictive. You mine the resources, you expand your planet or your business. So but the CPI can be a challenge as well, because again, it's a very niche genre. So for making a successful action idle game, you need to get several things right. First of all, you should choose a very marketable theme, which will make perfect sense for the player when he's trying to mine and use the resources. Also, you need to balance the in-game economy so it makes sense, so it looks realistic, so it emerges the player. And also, it's very important to make the core mechanic of mining very satisfying, very ASMR-ish. So the player wants to do it again and again, and it's pleasant. And add on top of that, good visuals, because it's also important to create the experience. So I can say that action idle can be a big challenge for even for most experienced hyper casual studios. So I would probably not recommend the newcomers to start with this one. Then if we need to sum up what key takeaways we need to keep in mind if we want to start in hyper casual and if we want to make our games. Basically, your hyper casual game should tick 3 boxes. It should be marketable, snackable, and fresh. Let's zoom a little bit on marketable side. So first of all, your game should be catchy. When the player sees the ad of your game, he is supposed to stop scrolling. He should be willing to investigate more about your game. Then, of course, it's crucial. It should be understandable. The player should understand at first 3 seconds of gameplay what he will need to do, how to win. Otherwise, he will not download your game. And of course, choosing the right setting is a key nowadays, because the more relatable is your game, the more it's marketable. So choose the topics which are understandable to everyone, regardless of their age or culture. So, for example, the good ones would be probably driving, school, family, love, something everyone experienced worldwide. So, and please avoid the niche topics like for probably like fantasy, anime, which would actually narrow down your audience. Also, your game should be simple. So it should not require any skill basically, and can be enjoyed by all age categories. Also, don't hesitate to make your game fast-paced, because you need to maintain the degree of excitement from your player, make it dynamic, make the content bright, and really making it release the dopamine in the brain of a player. And of course, the industry is moving more and more towards this satisfying side, when we are trying to create the experiences which are very hypnotizing, very, very pleasant to interact with. And also it should be fresh, because as I already mentioned, the competition is very hard. And in order to stand out on the market compared to other games, you need to be innovative. That means, of course, that you will draw inspiration from other hyper-casual titles, but be sure that you still add some new feature, because nothing attracts players more than novelty. Also, please make sure that your game fits the hyper-casual codes, that it's in 3D, it has portrait mode, it's divided into levels, that it has a really understandable user interface which helps your player, and choose the pastel colors, because they are the most marketable ones. Avoid monochrome palettes or darker colors. And of course, last but not least, your game is supposed to be funny because players are here for fun. So be sure to add some funny storytelling, some relatable situations from real life, funny facial expressions for characters, maybe some jokes. Players absolutely love it. And to wrap up about hypercasual, I can give you like an advice how to develop a game which will have good in-game KPIs, but without creating a lot of content. So that means, but you should create a deep game. What does depth means in this particular case? It's synonymous with freedom, actually. So if your player has several ways to pass the level, if there are several solutions to one problem and everyone can take their own path to do it, that means the game is deep enough and it's extremely cool. For example, you can add depth by, for example, leveraging the risk-reward mechanics. The players with less skill will take a safer path. Meanwhile, those who are more sure of themselves will take risk and get rewarded for that. Also, it's a great idea to give some creative freedom to your players. Don't hesitate to make them draw, paint, choose the colors, experiment with shapes. It also allows them to apprehend the game in their own way. And of course, there is another thing which is very connected to the notion of depth. It's replayability. So if you can play the same level again and again without having the similar experience, that means that your game is deep and it has a lot of potential to have great KPIs. How can you achieve it? Of course, you can have an interesting level design with which your player can interact and which would provide different outcomes if you play slightly differently, or you can embed always smart hacks, which are super loved by player because they make him feel smart and they kind of break a bit the rules of the game and allow the player to also to be free and do whatever he wants in the game. So the depth is very important, and I would advise to think about it already at the stage of ideation. Think how would you add depth in your concept in order to retain players for longer. And this is basically it. I hope you learned more about hypercasual and got inspired for trying your hand in this amazing and fastly moving industry. So I will be glad to answer your questions and to guide you further into your hypercasual journey. Thank you.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for sharing this. 1 second. Let me see what we can do. Yes, that's better. All right. Thank you very, very much, Ekaterina. I think you're already seeing the messages coming in and everybody's saying, yes, this is, this was very, very useful. Of
I'm
course,
very
like
glad.
you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for taking out the time to make a presentation. And I think it was very useful.
Thank you very much. So I shall answer the questions rather in the chat, right?
Yes, please, if you can.
Okay.
Yeah, because I
Thank
can
you
see
very
some
much.
of our other panelists are here. We may have actually 5 more minutes before the next panel can start because the time was 2:15. And I think some people may just be still joining in. I see a couple of them here already, but feel free. All right, so let's take a look at the questions.
All right. So let's start with the beginning.
Okay, well, most of the questions, are there any questions, guys? The attendees who are sitting here, do you have anything for Ekaterina? Okay, I think they understood because they're saying very informative. Oh,
That's
how
great.
have
I tried to
hyper-casual
keep it
games
short.
changed? Okay, so how have hyper-casual games changed in the last 2 years?
Oh, we saw a very drastic transformation because the hyper-casual games nowadays, it's not the same as hyper-casual games 2 years ago. The level of graphics rose dramatically. We saw that the games are starting to be way more female focused because nowadays when you open top charts, you have a lot of games about nails, family, beauty salons and stuff. It wasn't the case 2 years ago. Also, it requires to nowadays, for example, the making creatives for your hyper casual game is the key. Its importance is growing dramatically. So because that your CPI will depend a lot on the quality of videos on which you are producing. So your video should be super catchy, super clickable. Meanwhile, 2 years ago, you could have just have a good core gameplay. You could just upload, you know, your video of just a raw gameplay without any editing, without any call to action, and it would work. Meanwhile, nowadays it's a whole science how to market your gameplay. So this is why we are doing videos in-house in Ketchapp in order to help the developers, because it became like a whole profession on itself, I would say. So yeah, that's are the major changes which we have noticed.
And a quick follow up on that question. So when you say creatives, you mean the videos around it or the marketing materials around it?
The videos, yes. Those very videos about which I was talking in the part about the monetization. So that's how your players discover your game, and absolute majority of them are going to watch advertising on social networks like TikTok or Facebook, and this there's a lot of competition. So basically, your videos should withstand the competition with other organic content on a social platform. So that's extremely challenging.
Okay, wonderful. We've got another question as well. Is the funding driving the HCG changes or changing player trends?
I would say that it's a circle. So the players are getting more hyper casual games, and therefore they're starting to be more demanding. And the developers are trying to adapt to those changes, and they are producing more high quality content, which is more optimized in terms of KPIs and audience needs. For example, nowadays we test a lot the rewarded videos placement. We're trying to understand what are the most wanted elements, what's the content the player would like to receive, for which he's ready to watch an advertising. So I would say it's like a feedback loop which drives the changes on both sides.
Okay, wonderful. We've got one more question. So Moin is filled with questions. Okay, this is fantastic because Moin is also coming in from one of the universities here, Hamdard University. So I think this is fantastic for academics, academic institutions and academic, what do I want to say? I want to say personnel. Yes, we're taking an interest. Okay, so his next question is, HCG seem based so much on local culture. So are they following different paths in different regions?
Oh, no, it's actually quite the opposite. So the hyper casual, to be successful, it needs to be transcendent through all the cultures. So we are trying to choose the topics which are understandable for people all around the world, for example, schools, love, beauty salons, or something on the ASMR side, because people are having like the same notion of what's satisfying. So for example, they love cutting objects, they love particles, they love everything which you can for example, find in satisfying videos on YouTube. It's actually a great source of inspiration for your hyper casual games. Yeah, so basically the wider is your audience, the better it is. So meanwhile, some things which are based on local culture still can be popular. For example, the samurai theme somehow was pretty successful in hyper casual, but I think that the phenomenon of samurai in Japanese culture is so omnipresent that probably it can be an exception from the rule. But overall, I would say that we are trying to be as general as possible.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other question? I think we can take one last final question if there's anything that somebody wants to ask. Okay, if not, then I am going to officially close this particular talk and then talk about the next panel. Thank you, Ekaterina.
Thank you very much for making it
happen. Okay, so maybe one of our panelists has got a question. My question is, how do you go about marketing an HCG mobile if you're a solo developer? Okay, very interesting question.
So basically, nowadays in hyper-casual, you need to partner with a publisher. So if you have a publisher which fits all of your needs, who basically advises you on the market, who advises you the changes on your gameplay, basically helps you to bring the product closer to market standards, you can be a solo developer and issue a successful game. The marketing side is entirely taken care of by a publisher. We, for example, in Ketchapp, we produce the videos. You don't need to do it yourself. Our UA team takes care fully of the monetization of your game, and we already do our professional creatives on the test stage because we want to see the whole marketable potential of your game. So basically, if you partner with a publisher on the developer side, you just need to develop the game and to make the necessary changes. Of course, if you are eager to learn, it's always good to learn more about the market and about what the player loves. But a good publisher will always update you on those things and definitely take care of marketing.
And then I have a question, okay, just a final question. Do you think as a solo developer, it makes sense actually initially at least to work with publishers until they learn the ropes?
Actually, we have a lot of solo developers, and a lot of them are pretty successful. They issued some profitable games. There are cases when solo developers nowadays issued big hits. So depending on the scope of a game, of course, probably if you want to make an action idle game as a solo developer, it's not very realistic. But a runner, for example, a puzzle game, for sure, it's doable, and we work with a lot of solo developers.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Ekaterina, thank you so much.